Hey everybody, this is Tyler Main, and you're listening to Traumatic Cinematic.
I'm Leslie Easterbrook, and you're listening to the Dramatic Cinematic Show.
Hey, this is Joe Bagnata from That Metal Show Commercial, and you're listening to TraumaticCinematic.com. Let's rock and fucking roll.
This is Keith David, and you're listening to Traumatic Cinematic.
Hi, I'm Hart Motherfucking Fisher, and you are listening to my big ass blazing on at TraumaticCinematic.com.
This is Danny Trejo, and right now you're listening to Traumatic Cinematic. And if you don't keep listening, I'll kill you.
Hey, what's up? This is Fred Vogel, and you're listening to Traumatic Cinematic.
Freddy Krueger here, a.k.a. Robert Englund, and you better be checking out Traumatic Cinematic. Or else!
Traumatic Cinematic, bitches.
Check us out, TraumaticCinematic.com. Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back once again to this little thing I like to call the Traumatic Cinematic Show. I am your host, Mugumbo, like always. And with me once again, like you know, pretty much every week, you hear Mr. David Manifesto Gibson.
Still waiting on my first paycheck, too.
It'll be expired grocery store coupons and probably used prophylactics is what will be in the mail to you, sir. Also, folks, this is a special edition of the Traumatic Cinematic Show. We aren't coming together for our normal variety show, nor are we coming together for a film review. This is an interview episode, and we are interviewing the one, the only, the underground sensation, Mr. Fred Vogel.
What's happening?
Greetings, sir. I'm glad you could take the time out of your busy, hectic schedule to, you know, step into the Traumatic Cinematic Studio with us and have a few words. You know, there's for those at home that aren't quite certain who Mr. Fred Vogel is, he is probably most widely or most famously known for, at least to me in my mind, the August Underground trilogy. I had my first, I first had my chance to view those at the Jab Film Festival in Indianapolis, Days of the Dead. It was a midnight showing of all three of them till almost daylight, and people were vomiting and leaving the room disturbed and upset, and it was great and wondrous and quite amusing. I don't know, they might have just been drunk, or they might have been horrified of the sights they had seen, but it was quite spectacular. I made it through the first and about 3/4 of the way into the second, and then I had to go, sleep. But the Fred, what? As an independent filmmaker, and I've read, studying up on you, that you were a teacher at the Cevini School of Art or FX. What got you into this? At what point?
I've always been into it, man. When I was a little kid, I was really influenced by Frankenstein, and I found out early that I have what I like to call my macabre gene, where I was just kind of, more into the dark side of things. And, growing up in the early 80s was a really great time because it was the birth of the video boom. It was, Fangoria magazine was at its heights.
Oh, yeah.
And, being a little kid at that moment in time was really cool because it was, there was a lot of talk about special effects, a lot of talk about gore and horror films. Guys like Tom Cevini and Rick Baker, Rob Bottin were, huge influences on me. And, I knew exactly what I wanted to do pretty much at the age of 5. I wanted to make monsters in some way, shape, or form. So I just kind of honed my craft, messing around with makeup a little bit and drawing and eventually really finding my love for filmmaking.
And you brought up the video boom, and me and Lewis, we've had this discussion on air before, how the mom and pop video stores, they basically changed our lives. And it seems to be two different kind of horror fans. We're all in the same age group. It was either the ones whose parents didn't care at all and they had free access to those video stores, or the ones that found out later because mom and dad made sure they couldn't watch all that sick stuff. So how big of an influence were those mom and pop video stores on you?
Oh, huge. I was really lucky because I had like 3 killer video stores in my town, and each video store had like pretty much different levels of content. One was kind of like the more safe route video store. The other one was, had a lot of content. And then there was that one that had, the Faces of Death. And, they really kind of, pushed the envelope when it came to having everything that came to horror because, they knew that, back in the day, that's what people wanted to rent on a Friday, Saturday night. They wanted either like those cheesy, titty comedies or horror films. So those are the movies that I really was drawn to. Films like The Party Animal and Hard Bodies, and then I'd also be renting like Friday the 13th Part 2 and all the really great horror films.
I find it spectacular you mentioned Face of the Death. I was about to bring that up to you when you were talking about different contents of your video stores. And John Schwartz is me and Dave here have been friends with John for a while, and him being the father of Faces of Death, the Dr. Necro, or I can't even remember whatever the stage name that he used for when he was making them, but my mom,
Gross.
Yeah, Dr. Gross. My mom would rent those and bring them home, and so that was my mom. She was the type that. She took me to the video store, the cool video store with the 18 and over room in the back. But that just meant that the owners were also into all sorts of other good stuff. It wasn't like that. It was just a porn shop that had some horror. It was a horror shop that also had some porn and some action and some action adventure and some drama and blah blah blah. But the horror section was always the biggest. And to this day, and I've mentioned it before, but I can still close my eyes and walk down the 2 aisles of horror VHS tapes and see different covers on the shelves of different movies. I haven't necessarily seen them, but they're ones that I will seek out and find, but I can see the artwork on them and everything else. But yeah, the Faces of Death, and I attribute that to being like the first found footage film, right? And that's kind of, and I wondered, and that was one of the questions I have written down for you was, kind of jumping forward here, but did Faces of Death influence you at all? I mean, you're definitely different, but still kind of that moment captured in time on a video camera, to where it isn't like a story being told from start to finish with a character development, this, that, or another. It's more of a moment captured in time of an event, and I just was. Go ahead.
Yeah, seeing those movies at the time when you're little, you don't really understand. You don't know how a film arcs. You know what I mean? Like you're just watching a movie just to kind of escape. And for watching like a Nightmare on Elm Street film, which it has a very linear storyline, to watching a Mondo film such as like Faces of Death. To me, I was just trying to feed my brain whatever I can put into it that was going to make me feel the way that I wanted to feel. So when, believe it or not, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies actually, scared me more than a Faces of Death movie because, like the music, the build up, the stingers that would appear,
jump scares and
so that stuff, definitely things just sat differently with me. And I remember Faces of Death was one of those things where it's like, it's bad. It was almost like you shouldn't be watching this.
Yeah, like driving by a car wreck with a family laying on the side of the road that the police haven't gotten there yet to attend to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you should just drive right on by, but you don't want to. Like you got to look over.
Well, that's the feeling that I got from the Murder Collection. And actually, I watched VHS not too long after that, and I feel like almost the mainstream is coming to the underground because they had to see some of your films and it influenced them to a certain extent. Do you see that yourself?
Oh, of course I do. I think, the underground is just like the punk movement or the metal movement, and, music and, entertainment, where Hollywood loves to be like, oh my God, you have to see this. This is where it comes from. It's like the purest form because I get to make my movies without anybody telling me what I cannot do. I can put whatever kind of content I want to put in my films, and I have free range to do that. And I think, Hollywood, they'll take they'll take the backbone of that and be able to build off that kind of structure. Like VHS, is very similar to Murder Collection. Murder Collection came out in 2009, and the main reason why I made Murder Collection was there was this video going around the internet called Two Guys and a Hammer.
Oh yes, I've seen that. It's brutal.
It's got to be better than One Guy, One Jar.
Yes. But there was, and it really kind of reminded me of my first film, August Underground. You have like these kids, killing and laughing and doing these horrible things, and people would send me this video clip asking me if it was real, because I could spot a fake clip from a real clip like a turd in a punch bowl. So it was something that I knew that was real, and it really bothered me because. I used to watch those Faces of Death movies, then going on to Traces of Death and things like that. And I think when you're younger, it's kind of like testing your limits and seeing where you can go. But, as, someone who is in their 30s at the moment, I wanted to make something that can, look absolutely real, but not affect your psyche and not affect your gut like watching something that is real. So like you might think that you're watching real murders or real autopsy scenes in the Murder Collection, but you're actually watching something fake. So
right, there's
it's
a
just a testament to what we do,
knowing that it is fake in your mind you're able to relax some, and that's why you can actually handle watching it start to finish. Whereas, like honestly, there's I think that, and I'm sure you've heard this description before, but if somebody took one of your August Underground trilogy films, put it on a rough VHS tape and just put it in a paper sack and just left it sitting on a sidewalk unmarked with no credits, nothing rolling, just like it starts with the beginning of it and ends with no credits, nothing, police would be called in and people would be like the experience would be much different than if it was given an actual title.
Well, that was the way that I was going to market the movie. My whole marketing plan for the movie was to leave these tapes all across the United States and pretty much just wait till the police came and found me. Back in 2000 when 2001 when when the movie was made, Blair Witch Project was, this kind of movie that set a new standard where you can make movies on a smaller budget if you can come up with a really good marketing scheme. And they had a really great marketing scheme for the movie. Right. So that's what I wanted to do. I knew that I had a low-budget movie, and how do I get it out to people? And that was my game plan. In the first August Underground, my hair is dyed black. I'm normally like a dirty blonde. I put on weight for the movie, so I was a little bit heavier. Because I was planning on, going back to my normal hair color, losing some weight and kind of slipping back into society and waiting for this, for the police to come. And when 9/11 hit, it put a damp on things because my lawyer was pretty much like, Fred, if you do this, you're going to go to jail for a long time, because at that moment in time in 2001, the anthrax scare was going on. America was on a really high alert for anything like that. So, if I would have done this, circa, 96, 97, I could have got away with it, and it probably would have been the biggest fucking movie, to scare and terrify people in the world. Well, but, when all that shit happened, I had to really rethink what I was going to do. And then it was just like, I guess I'm just going to let people know that it's fake. But once I started showing it to people, they all thought it was real. So it kind of like it had the effect because it's the way that it's shot and the way that it looks. So it is well done, even though people knew going into it that it was an actual movie and not like me really killing people. Right.
Well, I mean, after 9/11, America was ready, like, take our freedom of speech, please, just protect us from the big bad. And it was you're right. They would have broken every one of our amendments to throw you in jail, and you'd be considered a terrorist. For what reason? I don't know, but yeah, just because it was unpopular speech, and at that time, you're right that was just bad timing. I mean, there's no way you could have avoided that. And Faces of Death did it. They put that out as it all being real, and it was all fake. Besides John Schwartz, obviously he admits it. He can't hide that nowadays. And besides the actual news footage and stuff that was given to him for Faces of Death, and some of the autopsies,
animal footage.
Yeah, and that stuff was all stock footage basically that he would use. But then the rest of it was, scenes that they had staged. And, but it was that they sold it as being real. Banned in 48 countries, that's always, that's the coolest thing to put a sticker on. Hell, if you just say, shit, you're banned in, countries, or if you show blood, you're banned in some countries. It's easy to get banned in Europe. For the most part.
I'm banned in a lot of countries.
See, but you haven't made a big sticker, or have you? No,
I haven't, because I kind of I let my art speak for itself. I was arrested in Canada for breaking obscenity laws, and
that's awesome.
Things like that. Sorry, but I never used it as publicity, because one, I was a little bit more embarrassed by it, because it fucking sucks, for one, to be busted for your artwork. But two, I like my art to speak for itself. Take it how you want to fucking take it. I know the power of my art and what's behind it. So I don't feel like I need to slap a gimmick like a banned in 48 countries on my films.
And I know in Murder Set Pieces, I've read that there was issues with the police there. You did the FX on that movie, which I think is phenomenal. That the FX work is great. Well, I heard that the police were involved a couple times on that set as well. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. We did some. When we did Murder Set Pieces, we were really excited because Nick Palumbo at the time, when he contacted me, I just got back from doing a tour with Necrophagia in Europe. I was in Europe for a month. I came home and I got a message from this filmmaker named Nick Palumbo, and he's like, "I want what you've done in your August Underground movies, like the effects, to be done on my film on 35 millimeter." I didn't think anybody was ever going to see my movies. They're little movies. Nobody who's going to really give a shit about it. But when somebody starts talking about I'm going to make a 35 millimeter film and it's going to go to movie theaters, that's real. That was real to me. So we were like, let's go all out. That's why there's some very simple. There's a girl hanging upside down. Some of the effects. There's kind of some stuff that we might have done in the August Underground movies, and we were just shooting it on film. So it was just so much cooler. But I mean, Jeremy and I, my business partner, Jeremy Cruz, we had the cops, came after us and put guns to our heads. And we were the first film ever kicked out of Technicolor because our effects were they're just so violent. We killed little kids. I mean, the stuff that we did in the movie was just, horrendous.
Now going into with the little kids is, as a filmmaker, is there a line that you've crossed most of them that a lot of filmmakers wouldn't, but is there a line that, that you would just, I would not do that?
It really all depends on the story that I'm telling. I don't ever like to say that, there's nothing that I wouldn't do. I mean, if I have a story that needs to have something in it and I can do it, then I'm going to do it.
If the story calls for it.
If the story calls for it. A lot of people always say, Fred Vogel's films are, gore for gore's sake. And my films are not gore for gore's sake. I'm telling a story, and everything that's in there is for a reason. All the violence that I'm capturing is to show how violence really is. Believe it or not, my films are more anti-violent films if you look at it. They're, August Underground is, what real serial killers do, and no mainstream movie has ever shown that kind of story in that kind of light. I wanted you to hate the characters. I wanted you to really be like, oh my God, these guys are the scum of the earth, instead of oh my God, these guys are the coolest, characters out there.
Well, that's
why they don't have any names. That's why they don't have any of that shit.
Well, it's just watch the news. I just watch my local news. There's some horrendous, horrific, terrible, disgusting things going on out there, and it's much better to see it in a fictional adaptation than it is to find out that there's some guy in Cleveland that literally kidnapped 3 girls and held them as sex slaves for 10 years, you know? To know that really happened, that fucks with my head. But to watch something that Fred Vogel made I can appreciate so many other things on that level. Now, if I picked up a dirty VHS tape out of the gutter in a brown paper sack unlabeled and I popped it in, I'd probably show a couple people, then have to turn it in, you know?
And I think a lot of your stories, there's that great story about the guinea pig 2. No one knows if urban legend or not. Is back when Charlie Sheen saw the movie, probably all hopped up on cocaine and informed the FBI. Which I don't know if Lewis has ever seen that movie, but
I know of its existence. I have not had the opportunity.
And some of Fred's movies, your movies are going almost into that urban legend-esque type of feel. Which, even though you don't want it to promote the movies, I think it does a really good job of it.
Yeah, I mean, it just so happened, you know, that's the life of as a film, you know, when you make a visual medium like that, especially in this day and age, who knows where it's going to go. I've seen little segments of the August Underground. People will be like, oh, check, they'll send me links to like ogrish.com and, you know, a clip from August Underground Mortem is on there, or, you know, these other different websites, and I'll find different clips from my movies on there. And, you know, some people think that they're real, and then, you know, every once in a while there'll be something down in the feed that says, you know, no, this is from, you know, one of Fred Vogel's movies.
I had a question about your casting, because of course your actors are going through a lot of shit to be in your film. How hard is it to find a couple girls that will let another actor puke all over them? That's got to be a pretty difficult assignment.
Those girls wanted to get puked on.
Like that's their thing? Like,
yeah, well, no, it was, you know,
Craigslist.
This is how it all went down. I got a phone call saying that we're going to shoot a scene tonight because Christy found 2 girls that will let her puke on them. And I was like, really? So what we did was, you know, when it came to more the violence, you know, that was me and Jeremy Cruz, because Jeremy, you know, we would want to put in, you know, in that scene in August Underground's Mortem where there's a vomit scene, there's also a gutting scene, and there's also like a girl that's all cut up, and we put a bag over her head and kill her. I mean, it's a very big scene. The cops were actually called during that scene. We had to stop shooting because the fucking police came down, and we had to talk to them and tell them we were art students filming a school movie.
Well, you know, that's we've heard that from Richard Rapphorst, who was doing Frankenstein's Army, that even with the permits and stuff, when they're filming stuff, the locals and people around them just didn't understand or comprehend what they were doing was artistic or filmmaking in general. They had cameras, they had a lot of people around, and then there was disgusting looking, you know, odd things that people just didn't understand, or just didn't feel right about. So they would call the law enforcement. So like, I mean, that's messed up, dude. Like here you are trying to make art and people won't leave you alone. Like, this happens a lot while you're making your films, doesn't it? Sounds like.
It's, well, you know, it's anytime you're making a movie, if you're making something small, if you're shooting, if you have a camera and you're out in the street, somebody's going to come up and say something to you because everybody wants their fucking 15 minutes of fame, even if it's a home video. So, you know, you just, as a filmmaker, you just kind of, you want to just be able to get your shit and get fucking done with it and move on to the next thing, you know? And,
right.
You know, I was shooting a teaser trailer for something recently, and, you know, this woman like completely walks in the shot and then like steps in front and says, "You guys making a movie?" And it's just like, obviously I'm making a fucking movie. I got a camera and a crew here, you know, and I'm sitting here painting my toenails.
Like, yeah, no, we're not making a movie. I'm just, I'm just practicing with this camera. Yeah, whatever the hell. I heard something. I heard a rumor that you are a history buff and you like to collect newspapers.
I do. I love history. I love American history. And I do collect newspapers. I got some pretty good ones.
Like do you collect? I mean, obviously you don't just collect like so and so is running for political office from 1987. It's you're looking more for like big events in time. Kennedy was shot, or Nixon's being impeached, or they're impeaching Nixon, or
I have like the Titanic sinks. That's one of my favorite ones.
Ooh, that is.
I have probably like 6 Kennedy assassination ones. I have Man Lands on the Moon. Jeffrey Dahmer being caught, OJ not guilty. I got to, stuff that's,
OJ not guilty. That was a nice piece of fiction
for history.
The I like like when we declared that we were going to World War II, that would be a good one. Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you can look at all sorts of points in time that'd be good to have a newspaper from. But I just think that's neat because newspapers are something that people read and they throw away. They don't even you don't even think twice about keeping them. So that's kind of an interesting collection.
Unfortunately, they don't last very. If you have some of the older ones, like my Titanic, and a lot of. I mean that's 100-year-old newspaper. So it literally could fall apart when you're flipping through it. Right.
Oh, understood. You almost need to have it framed and have it like to where it's pressed and kept from ever being touched again. The newsprint is such thin, delicate paper. Yeah, it's already like recycled to begin with, so it's not meant to last by any means.
And Fred, I know that most real horror fans are really anti-Hollywood nowadays. They just don't put out anything that most of us want to watch. But has there been anything, in bar Hollywood, any newer stuff from recent memory? I know you're a huge Frankenstein and Lon Chaney. You're really into the classics.
Karloff. Is
there anything that's in recent memory that's really inspired you to the point like you're like, fuck, I wish I would have thought of that?
I watch everything. I watch mainstream films. I watch underground films. I watch foreign films. I'm always willing to take a shot on the visual medium because I love it so much. I just saw The Wolf of Wall Street. And I love seeing Martin Scorsese's movies. I have like my favorite directors that I like to watch. I'm definitely more influenced by everyday life than I am from other ideas for movies. I get excited. If I see a really good movie, I get excited. It makes me want to kind of come up with something fresh. To me, it's more important to try to come up with something fresh, and my brain literally just spews out ideas. So my computer is just full of random notes of shit that of something I see or something that I've read or something that I've heard or even just conversation, just bullshitting with friends. You know what I mean? That would be like, wow, that could be a really great plot point for a story, and I'll just put it in with all my notes. And sometimes I'll just go through and just, see what works, see what sticks.
Right. Well, and I understand that, being creative myself, that I have a lot of times I have more ideas than I can ever humanly ever try to put in, try to create. It's just like, and it's so much easier to come up with an idea or a thought or a something that you just kind of got to make notes, and then when you're feeling a little starved or when you're trying to put something together to, like you said, refer back to them and become inspired again from them.
Like my new movie that I'm working on now. When I was making Maskhead, the guy who plays Maskhead, his name's Mike Witherall. He told me about, the other day he had to go help out. His father's a lawyer. He's my lawyer, and he had to go help his father's friend go pick up a dead body. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he told me about delivery service of picking up dead bodies for funeral homes, and that's the basis of my new movie.
Oh, really?
Pittsburgh body removal?
Pittsburgh body removal, yes.
Yes, thank you, Jason Hoover, for that tidbit of information. Yeah, cool. And so, when are you hoping to get this out? Like, and is this sounds almost like it's not as found footage or like a paper sack VHS like find kind of a thing? This is a little bit more of a traditional type of a storyline?
It is. I mean, it's it'll be what it'll be. But it's definitely my biggest movie to date. That's why it's taken me so long. I haven't made a movie since 2010. And the reason why is because I'm trying to take the underground to the next level. My goal is to make an underground movie with movie stars. Ooh. So to have movie stars in your movie, you need to have a really good script, which I have, and you need to have money, which I don't have. So right now I'm kind of in the process of trying to get my script out there to actors. But when you don't have an agent and you have to go through the system, it's a whole different animal. If I was going to make this movie like I made every other Toe Tag movie, it would have been fucking done. It's just that I'm looking for a kind of a caliber of actors that I can't afford at the moment. So I'm really trying right now to just raise money and do it and try to do it this way, the way they do it.
How did you feel about fan funding? Is this something the Kickstarters, Indiegogos?
Yeah, that's something that I've. At first I was really against it because I make my movies for my fans. I don't want my fans to make my movies.
Understood.
But what I'm looking for, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do a crowdfunding thing just to get me started. Because I feel like if I can get started and I can get the ball rolling to where I can get the script to the right casting directors, then I'll be able to raise the money. I see so many people doing it, and people are, and actually the fans are really coming out there and supporting. And I know I got the greatest fucking fan on the planet. So I think we're going to try it.
Well, good. And when you do, we will stand behind you 110% and support you all the way through, start to finish, because that you are the type of person that fan funding was meant for, not things like Veronica Mars. Thank you. Not things like Hollywood trying to put together a part 2 for a film that they could afford to do it themselves, but they want the fans to pay for it ahead of time. That way they know they're going to make a profit, right? And we could go on. We could do a whole podcast. We could do a whole new podcast series just on how ridiculous some of the fan funding things have gotten. They'll pay $50,000 to somebody to run their fan funding to try to get $100,000. That's not what it's meant to be. It's meant to be for someone like you, a micro-budgeted independent filmmaker making art, not just movies to make a profit, but to make art for people that appreciate that sort of genre. It's not for everybody. But you don't have to buy these films. That's just it. And speaking of that, I've actually have been told that, and we had somebody that was on. We went live last night and was broadcasting. We had Kyle Poling came on the show from the Bloodsticks and or Bloodbaths and Boomsticks, and him and Tim Gross are on that show. And he said he had talked to you at a convention, and that you wouldn't sell him your movies. You're like, you're not ready for him yet. That you actually denied him the sale of your films because you didn't feel like he was. Cinematically, like that was part of his genre, and you didn't want it to. You didn't think he was capable of handling it, and I think that's spectacular.
I'd rather not sell my movie to somebody if I don't think they're, if they're not their cup of tea. As much as I want to try to make money, and I'm a businessman, and that's the name of the game. But also, the name of the game is to not steer somebody wrong. I don't sell shit, I don't have to make shit up. Like I said, my movies are what they are, and if you know about them and you experience them and you enjoy them, awesome. But I'm not going to sit there and ruin somebody's fucking day by if the scariest movie is Valentine to you, you know what I mean? Like the last thing you need to see is August Underground's Mortem. So I'd rather not sell it to you. I'd rather you watch. One of my like Sella Tersica or something that's a little bit more, more on the mainstream side for you to watch than watching, a girl with her nipple cut off and guys smearing shit into it.
That was spectacular, though. Because I was like, oh, he cut her nipple off. I would rub feces in it. And then he did it. And I was like, wow, that was... Anyways.
And also speaking about the fans, we're going to be at Days of the Dead Atlanta, and of course you're going to be there. And I know you're screening Red Sin Tower, which I haven't been able to get my hands on, so I'm really looking forward to that. As well as you're lending out your own personal copy of Scrapbook, which I've seen numerous times and I actually really enjoy. I never realized how hard it was to come across. But going to these conventions, do you get like that slight feeling of rock stardom almost? Because I know in your everyday life, you're not walking around Pittsburgh and people are like, hey, it's Fred Vogel, because you have such a niche market. Is it like a whole different type of feeling when you go into one of these conventions? I'm feeling it has to be kind of insane for you.
You know, I've been doing the convention circuit for 12 years. I was literally selling August Underground out of my backpack at these conventions, bringing VCRs and doing private screenings in hotel rooms and just showing the movie. That's how I got started. And through the course of time and, doing conventions and pushing hard and the movies being as powerful as they are, it definitely put me out there, put Toe Tag out there, and people started to know us a little bit more. Of course, when you go to these conventions, it's easier to spot me because, if the fans know who I am, they're like, oh, there's Fred or whatever. So there definitely is a little bit of that rock star-ness to it. But, I think that's the same for everybody. I don't think Kane Hodder or Doug Bradley, walk down the street and people are like, hey, there's Pinhead or there's Jason.
Yeah.
I think that, it's a lot easier to spot when you're at a horror convention where people, know what you look like.
Well, you're around like-minded people. Maybe not obviously not all of them, but you definitely have more of a concentration of people that would possibly be into your stuff than at the mall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Otherwise, if they did recognize you, you'd be like, ooh, there's Fred Vogel, that fucking sicko.
Yeah, it's funny, man. Like, I've been recognized at him here in Pittsburgh. One time I was in the airport in Amsterdam, and some guy came up to me and was just like, are you Fred Vogel? And I'm like, holy shit.
That was the guy that made Serbian film.
So it's
that
funny.
was actually a woman. Don't get that. A woman made that film.
Oh, well, that makes so much more sense.
So it's interesting when people do recognize you, because and it's not really a big deal for me because I really don't give a shit, like. It's cool that that people do recognize you every once in a while, but like I so much enjoy being Fred, and not being something that people are going to gawk at. Like I feel bad for a lot of these movie stars that can't even like go get a cup of coffee without camera people taking pictures of them or their kids or whatever. I just think that's a horrible way to be.
Yeah, but I don't feel bad for them. They didn't have to. I mean. Just like Dave, like we went to go live last night, and Dave's like, "You're not watching the playoffs?" I was like, "Dude, I love football, but I have a hard time watching a bunch of multi-millionaires run around a field playing a game." Like, but I still watch, but like, if you're going to be in, if you're Tom Cruise, he could have stopped after making Legend, right? And people wouldn't he didn't have to keep going. Nobody made him keep going, but he did, and, he is what he is. And he can never go anywhere without people, basically asking him if he really believes in Scientology. So, Fred, I'm curious, and I already know the answer to this, sort of, but a lot of people would think that the type of person that would make some of these films, these extreme films, these little glimpses of, like the darkest depths of human nature, you're a pretty laid back, just a cool, regular guy, aren't you? You're not like you don't have like severed bodies all over your house, do you? Like of mannequins, and you don't like.
It's funny, man. Like how I live my life is just to be the most righteous Fred that I can be. I'm a husband. My wife Shelby is my business partner in Toe Tag, and I have really great friends. I don't like my house isn't black and I have pictures of death everywhere or whatever. I don't collect a lot of that stuff, like real death things. I just bad karma. I believe in that kind of thing. I really just live my life to be the best friend that I can be and be good to people that I care about and people respect me. I respect them. So.
You're just a normal average guy that makes art.
If I need to turn a little evil, I can. I think we all have that in our makeup. But my everyday life, I try to live it as awesome as I can.
Well, and I just wanted to point that out there for the people at home that Fred isn't some, he's not. He doesn't live in the Addams Family house. He doesn't have children that are actually like half wolf that live under the stairs. Like he's just like everyone else. You're a regular guy. You aren't the antithesis of your films. It's not like you have a cellar with a torture chamber, or do you? But well, I'm not going to talk about that live on air. But
that's kind of funny because it brings to mind the movie that I guess you kind of acted in, Fred, Sandman, which I got a feeling that you have to get that every once in a while, where you run into somebody and they just think that you're like the biggest evil person on earth. And I think Sandman was a brilliant film in how they played off of that type of mentality.
Yeah, Sandman was very interesting because I had no idea what route JT was going to go with the film. I just thought he was interviewing me for a documentary.
Really?
When JT Petty first contacted me, he contacted me about doing special effects for something. And then a month went by, and then I didn't hear anything back. And then he contacted me again and said he wanted me to do this documentary. And I'm like, well, what about the effects? He's like, we found somebody to do it. That was in New York. And I'm like, okay. And what he was really doing is he probably wanted us to do the effects for the Sandman, but then the more our relationship grew, just talking, he wanted to come interview me and then kind of surprise me with his effects in the Sandman. So even I had that experience too, because myself, Bill Zabub, and all the other people in the movie, none of us had a clue that it was going to be a mockumentary sort of thing,
Oh, that's brilliant, because I think he hit it right on, because it was perfectly blended, like full-on documentary with just a narrative, woven into it. I thought it was beautifully done. And having you on there and doing, that type of Sandman, how that film was made and even how those little segments were, you could tell he was influenced by the type of film that you do.
Yeah, the thing that kind of gave it away for me was if somebody was making those kind of movies, I'd fucking know about it. The horror community is not a big one, and we all kind of play in the same sandbox. Everybody just does different kinds of movies or whatever. But there's a circle, and somebody would have said something, or I would have heard about this guy. So that was kind of like the first red herring that gave it away.
Fred, you mentioned that people will give you films or clips and ask you, is this real? And is that, and does this happen a lot? When I say a lot, I mean like obviously more than probably me and Dave. I don't think anybody's ever given us a clip to say, hey, is this a real snuff film or not? But when this happens, are you almost scared to put it in and be like, fuck, dude, this is real? And has that happened? You don't have to mention anything, and maybe I don't even know if the legalities of if you should mention if it has happened, but is that it's got to be an odd feeling to pop something in that you don't know what you're getting into, because you can't erase something you've seen, right?
No, one of my favorite experiences was I was in Cleveland, Ohio, and I was at a Pig Destroyer concert, and the main guy from Pig Destroyer is a guy named Scott Hall. Scott Hall did the music for the Redson Tower, him and Steve Moore from the band Zombie. So I was going up to Cleveland to see my buddy Scott, and I was downstairs in the green room hanging out with the band and a few of the other opening bands, and one guy came up to me and was just like, hey, you're that guy that makes those sick fucking movies. And I was just like, yeah. And he's like, well, I got something that you need to see. So he's like, come with me. So I walk outside with this guy, and he opens up the trunk of his car, and he hands me this DVD. And I'm like, what is this? He's like, you just watch it and let me know what you think. And what this tape was it was a tape called the Crazy Dave tape. I don't know if you guys ever heard of this or saw it.
No, I haven't heard of that.
But it's made by these local guys in Cleveland. I think they're from Cleveland. But it's just clips of the most random, bizarre shit you'd ever see. I mean, like, it would be like Tom Hanks from the Green Mile taking that piss, intercut with a guy pissing into a girl's asshole, with banjo music playing in the background. I mean, it was just like these crazy random fucking clips. And when I was done watching it, my mind was blown. It was such a great experience from like the whole start to the finish. You know what I mean? From the dirty feeling of getting it from some guy in a parking lot from the trunk of his car to watching, this bizarre clip DVD.
Yeah, it's like because the best stuff doesn't normally come from some dude's trunk, right? You know, like that. That's not how Hollywood distributes stuff. But it's at the same time, there's a certain amount of credibility that might come from that. Like, hey, dude, you make those sick fucking films, right? I got something for you. It's like,
now,
shit.
Fred, you guys are you and the wife were having a special, I guess, kind of exhibition at Days of the Dead. Is there any insight you can give us about that, or are you kind of keeping it under wraps?
Actually, I don't think that. I think that's going to be indie, and I think that's going to be an indie thing, right?
Well, we're doing like this, like a teaser kind of test at Atlanta. It's called Splatitude, and it's going to grow a lot more. Like right now, right now we're just kind of like planting seeds to see what we want to do. But it's one of the things that I'm trying to get in bed with a lot of the different conventions. Days of the Dead. I have a nice connection there. Horror Hound, I have a good connection there, and of course Cinema Wasteland. So I'm just trying to turn people on to the underground scene. I think it's important, and guys like Jason Hoover, really run with the ball, and it's really great to see other people getting a chance to know about this, little subgenre in the main horror genre.
Well, I mean, anymore it's almost become the actual horror, because horror has become so mainstream and kind of bubblegummy that if you really, like, as an adult, as we've all been scared, to the point that we're not scared by anything anymore, that it almost takes that, an August Underground to be like, ooh, yeah, this is what I've been missing, as far as horror. I don't know. At least that's me. I think Dave agrees. And Dave here is the one that turned me on to this little niche market, or this subgenre. I shouldn't say niche market. I don't really think it's a niche market. If it was a niche, it'd be blowing off the shelves.
Yeah, me and Lewis started a show called Sadistic Cinema, and the first film we did was Cannibal Holocaust, which is one of my all-time favorites.
Oh yeah,
and he had never seen that, and so I tried to bring him right into a Serbian film, which
Fred here would have immediately known. No, you're not buying my August Underground. Like if you just now seen Cannibal Holocaust, you need to wet your whistle a little more and come across.
And I was actually thinking a Serbian film before August Underground, because it's more polished. It's not as realistic. But I think I probably would have been better off with August Underground, because when Lewis went back and watched August Underground, I was like, he's not going to like this. I was like, you probably shouldn't watch this. You're not going to be a fan. And he comes back and is like, oh man, I really do like this. It's so raw. So he actually surprised me when he was a fan of the August Underground films.
So the Serbian film was too shiny, and then of course, I'm sorry, but like sexual deviance is one thing, but they kind of pushed it over the hump there. But whatever. Like this has nothing. This interview has nothing to do with that film, because that was a. Anyways, No,
do
but
you get a lot of comparison, like, because if you Google the most disturbing films ever made, it's always you or a Serbian film. Do you get a lot of fan reaction, comparing the two?
I think they kind of all, like I said, those kind of movies all play in the same sandbox together. I think what August Underground, with my August Underground films have that the Serbian films don't have is just the pure rawness and the nihilistic evil that film has. I think Serbian film, just because how polished it is and just how over the top it almost makes it campy.
Yeah,
where August Underground is just pure raw.
And then you, like you said, you do not glamorize the violence at all. Which a lot of movies do nowadays. They make the serial killer with great one-liners, or make them,
Well, I think that comes from Freddy. I think that comes from Robert Englund being, the one child molesting serial killer monster that we all love, right?
Well, if you look at movies like American Psycho, where they make it just like a normal, 80s businessman who's, works out, has a great body, and, on the weekends he's a serial killer. And the great thing about your films is that it's realistic. Serial killers aren't, super intelligent, handsome people that just, go day-to-day life and just kill on the weekends.
Yeah, August Underground movies, I really wanted to show, like, the childish behavior. I was 23 years old when I made that, 23, 24. So, I was a kid.
Honestly, there was really no difference between them doing what they were doing to humans to putting firecrackers up a frog's ass or torturing kittens. There was no difference. There was no they didn't care that it was a human or a dog. It in their minds, it was just they were just having fun.
Yeah, and one of them August Underground was influenced by, a lot of things. It was influenced by Cannibal Holocaust. It was influenced by Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. It was influenced by Man Bites Dog. It was influenced by Last House on Dead End Street and Last House on the Left. But it was also influenced by, these videos of these kids shooting paintballs at people and videotaping it. And, or kids, inside condominiums smashing the glass out of there. I saw in 2020. Again, because it was real.
Now they're doing the knockout game.
And that's what it is now. Like if I made August Underground right now, that's what people would compare it to. You know what I mean? It's just, August Underground was ahead of its time.
You're absolutely right. It really was. I agree with you 100% there that it possibly a decade ahead.
Yeah, and it was really because the whole reason why the movie looks like shit is because any movie that was shot on video back in 2000, from 98 to 2001, 2002, looked like it was horrible, man. I hated watching movies that were shot on video back then because it was just this didn't look professional. I just didn't like it. But I didn't want anybody to say that about my film. I was like, well, I might as well make it look like shit because that's what it needs to look like. Instead of like, hey, this is a movie, it was more important to make it really look like how when you watch a home video that you've had from the 80s that was from your family's birthdays to a christening or whatever, you know what I mean? They all kind of the colors all blown out and saturated, and I didn't have the editing tools to make it to do that in post production. I was literally just re-recording over the tape. I'd export the movie onto a really shitty video wrestling tape that I had or something, and just keep doing it over and over again.
Really,
to make it look that way.
So you were taking an old school analog approach to getting the lo-fi quality that you were really looking for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is funny because in nowadays, in today's day and age, 2014, 2013. Lo-fi is making a comeback, is it not? Look 8-bit video games. They're starting to use they're making Pixlar or like Wreck-It Ralph and stuff. They're actually making retro type things, like where we all playing video games didn't like the 8-bit blockiness. We all wanted smooth, realistic looking stuff, and I definitely see that with film. Actually, like for the Atlanta Days of the Dead, I'm going to put out a zine, and and I was like, well, I get the software to do it, to actually print it out and like do it like in like a PageMaker or an InDesign in Photo or Adobe. I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? No, I'm just going to print out the text in the size I need it, and I'm going to cut it out of the fucking paper, and I'm going to put it on a photocopier. I'm going to print out the pictures I want and cut them out, and then glue them with, the glue stick on the paper, and I'm going to photocopy that, and then I'm going to make my master, and then, I'm going to take that lo-fi approach. It's funny that you said that with the videotapes, because I was thinking the exact same thing, because I want this zine to look like something that we'd have in the 90s, right? They'd be handed out at a punk.
That's the way to do it.
Handed out at a punk show, because that's what we would have done back then. We would have hand wrote it, or we would have hit it on a typewriter if you were lucky enough to have a computer, and you would have cut that out. And then if you wanted a graphic in it, you would have cut it out of a magazine or whatever, and double, take some Scotch tape, wrap it around your finger, and stick it on there, and put it on the photocopier at your mom's work, and make it like, all right, I got one page here, and that's exactly what I'm going to do, dude.
No, that's the way to do it.
Now, Fred, being in, you've been in the business, 12, 13 years now. Have you ever gotten a phone call from somebody that's well established, that's well known in the movie industry, that just blew you away, that they've actually seen your films?
I go out to Hollywood every once in a while, and I have a lot of friends that make horror films out there. They've told me stories of, oh my God, dude, they have August Underground parties at their house, like big people, and it's cool, but once again, it's kind of the thing where people think that I'm this fucking lunatic, so a lot of people are just afraid to contact me. It's almost easier to be like, you know what? Let me not say anything. Like one of the more recent ones is like I heard, Harmony Korine with his movie Trash Humpers, it was totally ripped off August Underground, and he said it to somebody or whatever. But until I hear it from the people themselves, and I just take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But you could definitely tell the influences that the movies have made. And my fans know, the real deal comes from Toe Tag and comes from Fred Vogel.
Yes, sir.
Now, when you were did you actually ever get to work closely with Tom Cevini, or is that just kind of name only type of school?
No, being in Pittsburgh, the whole reason why I moved to Pittsburgh was to work with Romero and Cevini. And, when I got a job at the Douglas School, which the Cevini School is a part of, of course I got to meet Tom and became very friendly with Tom. I was actually Tom's assistant director on his segment Wet Dreams, and part of the film Theater Bazaar. Okay. And, Tom and I are really good friends, so we've worked together, like I said. I was his assistant director on Wet Dreams, and Toe Tag did all the special makeup effects. And Tom actually even passed the torch to us in front of Fangoria. Fangoria did a write-up about it saying, Toe Tag are the new masters of gore and stuff like that. So, it's really awesome that he feels that way. Even though I know his love and respect for K&B, but, those guys are just amazing what they do too. But, like, for him to even put us in the same category, to talk that kindly about us, I'm very happy about.
Are we going to see you guys in more special effects only roles, or are you just dedicated more to making your own films?
We love helping out other filmmakers with their special effects. I think there's a lot of talented people out there that blow it because they don't have the right effects. And all they have to do is ask. A lot of people think Toe Tag just works on Toe Tag, but that's not true. Toe Tag loves to do other films. We just did a film for director Adam Garish, who did like the Night of the Demons remake. His new movie called Schism, we did the effects for that. Jeremy just went over to Thailand and did effects for James Colin Bessick's new movie. I just did effects for a dark comedy out of New York. So, whatever we can do to help the genre, we're all about helping the genre. It's not like, we're too good to help you out. Toe Tag wants to make your blood look good. Toe Tag wants to make your effects look good.
We want to make your awful look good.
Yeah. We just want to help.
It's a big happy it's a big family. And you got to help each other, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I never look at it as like, Toe Tag's better than this or whatever. It's all about the greater good to making good movies, because I want to see good effects in movies. I hate when I watch a movie and the effects are shitty. And it's like, why didn't those people just contact us? We would have fucking gave them blood instead of putting that, melted cotton candy that they're squirting out of a fucking hose,
Yeah, the Soska sisters should have called you for American Mary. I feel they shied away from everything, and they could have used you guys to actually. They pulled
the camera away from it. They cut away from everything. There might have been great gore there. We just didn't get to see it. They cut away from it.
Here's the funny thing about them. They're talented girls, and like you said, American Mary, they cut away. But look, now they're making a bigger movie. It's funny. I never cut away. If in a Fred Vogel film and Toe Tag film, that's one of the things that you're going to know is like you're going to see that.
Right.
Like Toe Tag is I'm going to show you what that looks like, and it's not me glorifying it. It's just that it needs to be shown.
Yeah, and then we've had multiple discussions about, because the Dead Hooker in the Trunk I loved, and then the American Mary I really liked, but it just left a funny taste in my mouth. And then we got talking about it, and with Hart Fisher actually, and then that's what it was. They cut away from everything. They didn't show you anything ever. Like they talked about it, they implied it, they put the idea in your head, and it was like, oh well, your imagination will finish what the scene was. Well, that's fine in some applications, but not for the entire film. And then they do See No Evil too for WWE.
Yeah.
So, which I know you are a wrestling fan, aren't you?
I'm a huge wrestling fan.
Yep. So
I'm a huge wrestling fan, and I would have loved to make See No Evil too, but I guarantee, they'd be like, Fred, we need you to tone that down, and Fred doesn't tone down.
Right. Well, that's what happened with Xavier Jins, the guy that made The Divide, and then he did Hitman, and what was his first Frontiers?
Yeah.
And then he when he did Hitman, there was like that movie has like an extra 45 minutes or something ridiculous, and they had to go and recut it and reshoot scenes because he made it so ultra violent that they just they had already spent all this money and the movie was finished. He gave him a finished film that was like almost I think he said like almost 3 hours long of all this ultra violent, and then they had to cut it all out. And we tried to see if we could get the copy from him to destroy, but he wouldn't. He didn't bite on that. But,
and part of sometimes I feel like maybe I'd be a little bit further off and making big, huge Hollywood movies if I just would tone down a little bit.
It would eat your soul away.
But that's not what I love about horror. Like what I love about horror is I love special effects. That's why Jeremy Cruz, who is the head of Toe Tag Special Effects and his amazing talent. That's why my movies work so good. It's and plus like with my wife Shelby, who's like the producer for Toe Tag. We're a really tight knit family, and we make it all work because we're trying to make something special. Like I said, I make art films, and they're not meant for everybody, and I'm not trying to make films for everybody to see. I like making films for people like you guys who want to see something different. It's more important for me to strike a nerve than to hit a mass market.
Right, and thank you for that, because there's plenty of people out there trying to make stuff for a mass market, and we don't need any more of that because it doesn't work very often. And nobody gives a shit about them. That's the thing is like,
you talk to a horror fan, they'll be like, "Oh, I've heard of Fred Vogel. Tell me who directed the remake of Friday the 13th that made millions of dollars." You know what I mean? Like they don't know Marcus Nespol's name.
No, and they don't care because it wasn't.
Nobody cares.
It wasn't good. It was just. It was one of those things where they did enough focus groups and they found, well, we'll make a profit on this. That's all that mattered. It didn't matter. It didn't have to be good. It was a name that they could sell, they could advertise, and they could fill the seats and sell tickets. We can make a 15% turnaround on this, plus the merchandising, plus the videos, and everything else, blah blah blah. Which that's not how art was made. That's not how it was supposed to be, and that's how it's become, though. Unfortunately.
Now, Fred, what is your stance on remakes? I'm kind of a purist, but I saw Maniac this year. It was probably my favorite horror movie of the year, which I think was brilliant. Even though Maniac, the original, is one of my favorite, Tom Cevini film, where he did all the FX in there. What is your stance on the remake? Would you ever, if you got a chance to remake something, do it, or are you totally against it?
I received an award a few years ago in Los Angeles with Bill Lustig. And I told him, I'm like, Bill, I would never fucking ever want to remake anything. But if someone said, Fred, you can pick any movie that you can, want to remake, I wanted to remake Maniac. And he's just like, well, they're already remaking Maniac. And I was like, oh, man.
Fuck.
And I mean, I had a really great story. I wanted Andrew Dice Clay to play the Joe Spinell character.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
And he hasn't done anything forever either. At least not that I know.
He would have been awesome.
He would have been.
But 10 years ago, I fucking hated remakes. Now it's kind of just became old hat to me. I don't even really give a shit. I really enjoyed the Maniac remake. I thought Frank did a really great job directing it. Made a really great movie. Elijah Wood was good. Everybody was really good. The effect came. Those guys did a great job. If I was going to remake anything, it probably wouldn't be a horror movie. I'd want to remake, one of my favorite like titty comedies from the '80s or something like that.
Ski or Snow Patrol. Porky's, like redo Porky's, or just not even redo it, just like Porky's 4,
like Hamburger the Motion Picture or something like that.
Yeah. What about what nobody's ever thinks about redoing, like Cannibal Holocaust? Like they're going to go back. Like it's happened again. They found another cannibalistic tribe, and
Eli Roth's Green Inferno, I think, is kind of gonna be in that direction because he did use the term Green Inferno. I used to be like, there's certain films you shouldn't remake, and Maniac was one of them. And I was so dead set against it, and I watched it, and it just blew me away. I was like, because that was one of the few movies, it is really underground. Not many people knew what it was. Even a lot of horror fans don't know Maniac. I was really surprised they chose to remake that movie, but they did a brilliant job on it. I went and saw Maniac last year in New York City. They did Lincoln Center had a really small screening with it, and the director was there. And I drove all the way from Pittsburgh. And one night I drove from Pittsburgh to New York City, which is 6.5 hours. Watched Maniac, and then drove all the way back home in one fucking day. And it was totally worth it because I got to see it on the big screen. I got to see it uncut. And two, it was one of those things where, Maniac is one of those really important movies to me. If they were going to, destroy it, I kind of wanted to see them destroy it just so I could fucking hate it even more. But they didn't.
No, it was. I loved it. I really, really liked it, and I loved the use of the song from
Silence of the Lambs.
Silence of the Lambs.
And that's just one of those songs that when you hear it, it invokes an emotion in you already. It's not that I necessarily said, "Oh, Silence of the Lambs." I didn't even make that connection, but I was like, "Ooh, that's creepy," and I want to dance and rub my nipples for some reason.
Yeah, it had all the elements. It had the tits. It had the gore. It had the soundtrack. The score was fantastic. It didn't have New York. But hey, you know, downtown LA is shittier looking than New York. At the moment.
And just as many homeless, if not more, because it's warm all year round.
Yeah. So I mean, like, and it really surprised me, and it kind of like gave me faith. Like, if they're going to be making these remakes, like maybe they'll get them into the right hands with the right directors and the right producers that will be like, hey, you know, I really love Maniac. Let's really try to do something special. And I think that's what Aja did. I think he said, like, hey, you know, I love Maniac. Let's give Frank this movie and let's make a really good fucking movie. And they did.
I think that it was one of those films that it wasn't like a typical, like, let's remake Nightmare on Elm Street. We'll definitely make 20% back on our investment. That was, I mean, I don't really think that they remade Maniac with the idea of making a big profit. That was like, they're like, let's see what we can do with bringing this into the modern, you know, day and age, right?
Yeah, it's because not many people, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street is so pop culture. Freddy Krueger is so pop culture. You know, it's easier for them to sell a ticket to that. You know, Maniac, I never even heard of it. And then they were trying to go off Elijah Wood, you know, and I just think it was so graphic for mainstream audiences that's why it really never really hit the mainstream like it did. You know, nowadays, if you make a movie like Maniac and you want to put it into theaters, you know, a lot of these theaters aren't going to take it. They rather show fucking Frozen for another month and a half, you know, for the kids instead of having, you know, a horror film in there. Because if you go back in time and you look, you know, how long the Maniac stayed in the theaters, man, it was months and months. You know, Maniac would stay in a movie theater for almost a year in some places in New York because it was just bringing in so much fucking money. And Lustig's still living off that money. So, you know, I look at these guys, you know, who are remaking, like, you know, the first-time filmmaker. You know, he directed a fucking Hellman's commercial. Now he's making 47 Ronin or whatever. Bullshit. Like, Hollywood is they just don't know. And what Hollywood needs to do is they need to listen to the fans. And they need to listen to, you know, they need to be smart about it. Because if they would have done Nightmare on Elm Street and really made Freddy Krueger a fucking nasty, dirty pedophile and made it dirty, like, it would have, you know, it could have succeeded.
It could have, and to make you actually hate him and not have the poppy one-liners.
Yeah, and it was, you know, and it was in this, you know, mixing the CGI makeup on his face, and I liked the guy who played, you know, who played Freddy. I didn't like him as Freddy, but you know, I like that actor.
Guy played Horshack in Watchmen.
Yeah,
cannot remember his name right now.
Kelly Leak from the Bad News Bears. That's who that is.
Oh. You know, you're right. Like it's like the dude that does like 3 iCarly episodes, and they're gonna have him redo, you know, the 7th Samurai. You know, or it's like, what? How do you go like? All right, who did he marry? Like who did he marry? Whose daddy her daddy runs Universal, right? Or you know, and there's too much of that goes on. I imagine. I mean, I probably would be sick to actually know how bad some of that is, but the nepotism and you know who you blow to get ahead really probably matters a lot.
Yeah, and then their career's done for. You know what I mean? Hollywood will spit you the fuck out, and they'll spit you into a recess that it'll take years or maybe even never for you to show your face again. You know, to me it's not worth selling my soul to go make some big fucking movie where they're gonna, you know, tell me that, you know, sorry, we're gonna cut your movie to shit. Or, you know, they're going to tell me that I have to put in, you know, a blonde-haired, green-eyed actress in the scene because a focus group tells me that I need to have this scene in my monster movie. Well, like, fuck you.
Well, that was.
I know I'm Fred fucking Vogel. I know what horror needs to have in it. Like, don't tell me what I need to fucking put in it.
Dude,
that's why you're hiring me, right?
That should be a movie. You need to write that down in your notes. I'm Fred fucking Vogel, and it needs to be like you like you decide you're like, all right, it's been tough, you know. These hardcore films where I need more money. I want a yacht. Like ever since I was a kid, I want a yacht, and then it goes into like a dream sequence of you like on this big boat, like trying to catch a marlin, right, for some stupid reason. And then so you're working for Hollywood, and it's just like everything's so miserable and cliche and stereotypical, and it's like, and that's just it. You're like, I'm Fred fucking Vogel. don't you know who I am?
And you're like, no, I never heard of you, and I'm like, yeah, I know.
And then it turns into your movie of a serial killer where you start taking out producers and focus groups. Like you go into a focus group that wants you to have the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 5'3" actress. Can't be 5'4" because they don't like tall women. And
for instance, in August Underground, I remember when reviews started first coming back, and people are like, "Why does he put these ugly girls, these ugly fat girls, in his movie?" And to me, if I would have put fake titted, beautiful blondes in there, you wouldn't believe that it was real.
No,
you would know that because. My character is a 6'3", 280-pound fat guy, who's getting girls. You think he's going to get a fucking supermodel? No, he's going to fucking get some fat girl with zits on her ass or something. You know what I mean? Like, that's what he's going to get.
Well, I mean, honestly, when you kidnap somebody, it doesn't really matter what you look like, right?
Yeah.
That's like,
that's my mentality of thinking. And like I said, in my mind, I think it's the right thing. And to my diehard fans, they agree with me.
Well, no,
to the mainstream, that's not the way it works.
Well, because they're not used to seeing people like real people up on screen. They expect everyone to be that 10 pounds underweight, rock hard, anorexic bodied, fake tittied, woman. They don't realize that women aren't really that way. At least not any of them that you want to be around, because they're such bitches that you will want to cut them into little pieces. Because they're hungry. They're so fucking hungry.
And they're miserable. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they might look pretty, but they're so ugly on the inside. It's just such a shame.
Because they're starving to death. They're
starving.
They don't have any fingerprints left because they've shoved them down their throat so many times. They've burned them off with stomach acid, and they're.
Now that you are a married man, but
yeah,
you were single when you made the August Underground films, or were you and Shelby together at that time?
No. When I made August Underground, I was dating a girl, and who did not like the fact that I was doing these scenes with these girls.
Yeah, I was thinking, how do you explain that to a woman? Even, hey, my name's Fred. You want to see some of my movies?
Like, did you have to give her the same name as me? Like, are you trying to say something?
When I first met Shelby, she was working on a haunted house. That's how I met her. She was, her and Jeremy were working on a haunted house together, and I went over to her house and I brought August Underground with me. And I was like, well, this is my movie. Because, I was proud of it, but I was also nervous because, the August Underground movies are a fucking ticking time bomb to people. Like, either it's going to go off in their hands and blow them up in the face, or they're going to get it. And thank God Shelby got it, and she understood what I was trying to do. So, I mean, it's always scary. You know what I mean? Like, approaching a girl with it. With something like that. And if you can find a girl that likes August Underground, you got to keep her. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's what it's hard for me to approach my wife with it. And I was like, "Hey, what are you watching there? What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Oh, she's used to that at this point. She has to be.
Well, she's kind of used to it, but I think I was watching I was watching Mortem again the other night, and she's seen some pretty sick shit. I put her through a lot. But I got her to watch about 5 minutes of it before she's like, I got to go knit or something.
Yeah, I'm gonna go make a sweater real quick. Well, Fred, it's been awesome, dude. You really are a good dude. I don't care what anybody else says.
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to tell the fans out there listening? Because I know you have a lot of diehard fans, and I'm guessing that this will attract some listeners. Is there anything you want to tell them or promote? Well,
the next time you guys will be able to see me will be at Days of the Dead in Atlanta. We'll be coming down there. I'm also going to be dropping some big news about my new movie this month, and also hoping to figure out if I'm going to do a Kickstarter or Indiegogo or something like that to kind of get me started with it. But I really just hope you guys continue to believe in what I'm trying to do. Continue to spread the sickness with toe tag and turn on your friends, and give them something else besides the norm. because we're certainly not. And like again, thank you guys for taking the time to chit chat with me as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And I will be at Atlanta, so I can't wait to meet you face to face and see the little exhibit that you have going on. It's you and other than you, it was Damien Eccles, who were like the two people that was most excited to actually be around in the same area. So
me too, man. Me too, Damien. I got to meet Damien in New Jersey. I got to hang out with Jason Baldwin.
Yep, he's awesome. I got to talk to him for about an hour in Chicago.
And those guys are, the respect that I have for them as men to have been through what they've been through, and to come out, as unscathed as they have. You know what I mean? I'm sure we'll never know. I mean, I've read Damien's book and I've talked to them, and those guys have been through some serious shit because people in this fucking country just don't, they judge first and ask questions later.
Yep. You're absolutely right about that, Fred. Absolutely.
I could have been, that could have been me. That could have been both you guys. You know what I mean?
Easily.
That's why I was so drawn to them, because it happened in 93 or so. Me and Jason were right about the same age, and if I lived in Arkansas, I was a headbanging punk kid. I probably would have been hanging out with those guys and probably gotten into some trouble right along with them, because they're the only two other, the three guys in town that were kind of similar to me.
Yeah, me too. Same here, man. Yep. And when I made August Underground, I was gonna donate some of my proceeds to help with their funds, for their lawyers. And my lawyer at the time was like, "Fred, please, it could make it worse for these guys. Like, don't that's what I was thinking. Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Fred Vogel. I made a movie with killing girls, all this nasty shit. But I want to donate my help these these killers.
Yeah, because they don't look at who you are; they look at what you made.
It just would have been bad. But it was just I mean, I really believed in them, and like I've had a Paradise Lost poster that every house that I've ever lived at, I taken it to and showed people and was like, you have to see this documentary. I had them on VHS and I recorded it off TV, off HBO, and showed everybody about these guys, and look how these guys are wrongfully accused. And but even me watching those documentaries, I falsely accused the stepfather, one of the boys.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that guy's the fucking killer, or whatever, because I didn't fucking know.
Well, just
and it's the quiet one. The quiet one's the one who
of course it
has
is
the
the quiet.
DNA involved. So.
Hey, and we all thought OJ was guilty, so that's not really funny, but yeah. All right, Fred.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to see Damien's thing too. I made sure I told the promoter of Days of the Dead that I need to be there for that, because even though I've seen him do his talk before and stuff, I mean, he's that was a modern day witch trial, and those kids did not deserve that at all.
And what's scary is it happens every day all around this country, and we just don't hear about it. They just made the headlines, whereas other people don't.
Luckily there are a couple of white kids too, which 3 white guys too, and it happens in the minorities much worse, and they don't get any press over it either. So
nope.
Yeah,
I know, it's really a terrible thing. Well, Fred, before I forget, I got one question. Would you do a bumper like, "Hey, this is Fred Vogel. You're listening to Traumatic Cinematic," or something like that?
Sure. Hey, what's up? This is Fred Vogel, and you're listening to Traumatic Cinematic.
Thank you very much, sir. It was great having you on. Stick around real quick, and after we finish this up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you can find us at traumaticcinematic.com and on Twitter at TC Podcast Crew. Thank you for tuning in. Till next time. I'm on the internet.